Hey, and welcome back. It's us. I'm Bobby. This is Aaron.
Yo.
And this is episode 31. And we're pumped about this because we just got back from port.
Yep.
We just got back from port with the R34 you see behind us if you're on YouTube. And if not, just picture a beautiful R34 GTT sitting behind us.
Yeah.
And so we have obviously covered, how to import a JDM right-hand drive car. But now we kind of want to get into the nitty-gritty on how that process really works. And so we're going to make it like a 2-episode thing where we'll kind of give you the introduction and how we got to the car.
Right.
And then the second part will be how we actually acquired the car and the port clearing process.
Right.
So today is obviously episode 1. And so we're just going to kind of chat about how this came to be with Trevor from Kizo and just, kind of how smooth that process really went.
Right. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah. So, about I think October, November of last year, I decided I really wanted to import a GTT, whether it was for like flip or for personal use. I just knew I wanted to be able to import one, and I knew that they were becoming legal and they would be the first R34s to be legal.
Right.
So, and it was actually kind of weird how I found out about Trevor. There was somebody, I think it may have been EOT, and they tagged him in a post. And I was like, oh, who's this guy? And I clicked on it, and obviously he's an importer of right-hand drive cars, he's, exporter. I guess, technically an exporter. But, yeah, and so I just hit him up to see what the deal would be, how that would work. And he was pretty much, he's like, hey, this is fine. We do this all the time. We're getting a lot more requests for these GTTs. But just so you know, you will have to pay some storage because this isn't going to become legal, until June.
Right. You had a few months.
Yeah, it just depends, So I think I ended up paying about 8 months worth of storage. And don't quote me on it, but I think it was $150 a month. So, you added on about $1,000 to the cost of the car based on just storage alone.
Right.
So he was like, we can find you one. I have multiple, inspectors in different parts of the country. We want to stay away from Hokkaido as much as we can because that's where you're going to get a lot of the rust and
right, because that's the North Island. That's where all the heavy snowfall. Yeah, and obviously, like in America, they use same stuff, salt and all that on the roads, and that just destroys these cars that are already prone to rusting in normal conditions. So,
right,
yeah, definitely want to stay away from up north.
Yeah, so. He kind of started looking, and the way that the process went was he would kind of send me a link to either GooNet or something like that or the dealer's website, depending on where it was, and I would have to then say, let's inspect it or let's pass on it.
Right.
And, I would say he sent me... Before we found the keeper, I would say he probably sent me like 15 or 20.
Yeah, that's pretty decent. That's quite a bit of cars.
Yeah, and this was over a few week period or whatever, but he sent me that many, and then he was like, all right, if you want one inspected, there's this low inspection fee. Again, I have inspectors that I work with in all different places, and I can personally go look at it for a bit higher fee, depending on where it is. And so we had found this white one, and I was looking for white because I was trying to keep my collection of white cars. And so if I was going to keep it, it matched. And if I didn't keep it, oh, well, it's white. It's fine. And so he goes and he looks at this white car, and I believe it was at a dealership, not an auction. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't great.
Right, I remember that one. I think he FaceTimed you, or the inspector FaceTimed you as they were checking it out. And I forget what exactly was like not wrong with it, but it just wasn't as clean. It just wasn't as clean.
It was
definitely
rough.
Right. It it needed a little bit of paint here and there maybe, or it just wasn't the clean example that you wanted to spend your money on.
Yeah, and I remember the miles on it were like mediocre in the sense of like it was like over 100,000 kilometers.
Looking back, it was probably the run of the mill GTT.
Somebody has it over here.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean,
someone bought that car.
Bought it.
Yeah.
So, but right, it was it was just the average.
Right.
Some multiple owners. All of that, and so I was like, man, I can't do it. I just can't bring myself to wire you this money on a car that I'm not like fully on board with.
Right. And that's kind of a hard thing to do, right? Because like you're excited, you got the money, you want the car.
Yeah.
First, when they send you, I'm sure it's like,
yes, go,
get
go,
it.
Go,
yes,
go.
that's an R34. Get it. Like,
yeah.
But you got to slow down, right? And you got to listen to their feedback and actually like look at the cars and the stuff that they're sending you, so you don't make some crazy decision on this car that you might end up regretting. Not saying that they would let you do that, because there are piles out there that are not worth what people are asking.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure there was an exporter that would have let me do it. Because, but I feel like Trevor kind of, especially. And if you don't know about Trevor, he is an American guy. He's from Maryland. He moved over there long time ago, and he was an English.
Yeah, I think he moved over there to be an English teacher at first.
Yeah.
Like common theme with a lot of the Americans.
Yeah, a lot of these guys. Yeah, we're like, how many English teachers are there?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, not to say that I can trust an American over a Japanese person. I probably could trust them both equally, but in the sense of I can communicate with this man and there is zero barrier. There's no issue.
Exactly. Which goes a long way.
Yeah, it does, because he can articulate things to me that a Japanese person trying to speak English wouldn't be able to really.
Because there is always like a little bit of like a barrier there. I mean, because their terms or words they might use might mean something a little bit else over here, and vice versa.
Oh, yeah,
yeah. Things can kind of get lost. So, yeah, having someone that's like fluent in both definitely goes a long way, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. And so, so at this point, where Trevor and I are talking about, I'm like, yeah, this isn't the one, man. It's just not.
Right.
And then, he sends me a few more, and I'm like, and it is hard. So let me get with this. It is hard to communicate in the sense of like, how are most of us used to getting our communication on our phones?
Right. Text message.
Text message, yes.
Which is
that's non-existent. You can't text message a Japanese phone like straight up, just type in the number and send the text. And so this is like forcing us to communicate through Instagram and then WhatsApp.
Right. Which always sounds, I mean, to me, whenever you see scammers doing things, that's the apps they use, right? They use WhatsApp. Contact me on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And that's normal to them. But like to us, where you can text everyone and all that.
Yeah,
like, it's like, dude, just text me.
Yeah, just text me.
Right?
Like you will get straight to me. Like, there's like a wall between Instagram and you, right? Like you get a notification, you don't get like an alert.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so this was causing me, and then of course, as we're all aware, that 13-hour time difference.
Oh yeah, that's bigger, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
for both ends, both parties.
Right. So like, we're having to talk to each other at like 6:30 a.m. or like, whatever, 7 p.m. or those type of things. And
yeah, I remember talking to Trevor when we were there. He was saying that's like a big thing that a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
That this dude is in Japan. He's 13-hour time difference, like literally flipped.
Yeah.
Difference. So, he's texting you at 8 a.m., but here it's like 9.
Yeah.
So it's like
it's 9 p.m.
9 p.m.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right.
So his beginning of his work day is like the end of my day, and the beginning of my day is the end of his day. And
so if you're not on schedule with each other, like days can go by and nothing gets accomplished.
That's literally what would happen, because he's trying to stay up really late to get a hold of me, but he's messaging me on Instagram, and like those notifications aren't coming through.
Right.
So like, then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, what about Trevor? And I go and look back, and he sent me fucking 6 cars.
Like, oh,
and I'm like, shoot.
No.
Yes. Yeah. I go and look, and he's like, no, that one's sold. That one's gone.
Yeah.
He's like, you want me to look at this one? I wouldn't recommend it. I'm like, damn, dude. Like, but so
that's part of it, though. Right?
Yeah, you have to be aware, and you can't get frustrated with these dudes. Like, some of them are staying up until 10, 11, 12 p.m. or a.m. at that point, just to communicate with you, because they want to make this happen for you and themselves. So you really can't get frustrated. At least this is my experience with Trevor.
Yeah. You definitely got to keep that in mind when dealing with anything overseas like that. Like,
yeah, there is a huge,
like, on top of the language barrier, there's also a little bit of a time barrier.
Yeah, for sure. And so basically, I had kind of started getting like a little discouraged, because I'm like, man, like, between everything we're talking about right now, plus like not being able to find like that car that I really want.
And then you're like, damn, I should have got that white one. That was the very first.
I'm like, dang, this is tough. So then all of a sudden he's like, hey, this one, I found one. It's at, I think it was Motorsports Rabbit. You heard of that?
Yeah.
Rabbit?
Yeah.
I think, so this car that he shows me, it's not at auction, it's at dealership. He says, we've worked with this dealership many times.
Yeah, I've seen him post a bunch of them.
Yeah, they do not put out junk. It's whatever. You could compare it to Garage Defend or whatever on a lower scale, right?
Right.
So I'm like, all right, well, black. I'm like, man, this really isn't what I wanted. He's like, it has 34,000 kilometers. I'm like, what? He's like,
you said 340,000?
Yeah. I'm like, you mean 34,000 miles? He's like, no, that's like 17,000 miles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, no. I'm like, that's a
do the calculation
swap.
real quick.
Yeah. I'm like, nah, dude, there's no way. He's like, no, this thing matches. Like, this thing is it. He's like, everything is completely clean and brand new on the car.
Yeah.
And it's only got, 34,000 kilometers. And so I'm like, at this point, I've already spent the inspection fee twice.
Right.
So I'm starting to feel like I'm blowing through, and it's not a ton. I think it was the equivalent to $150.
Right. Not bad.
But after 3 times,
you're like,
you're up to 500, right? So, but when he said the 34,000 kilometers, I was like, all right, let's just check this thing out.
Right.
And so he sends Nippon Nick. If anybody knows Nippon Nick, he works for Zap Auto, and he's like a character. Yeah. He's a character.
Yeah. I remember that video, dude.
Yes. But I have since become like friends with him on Instagram and like chat with him and stuff, and the guy's funny. Like, he's got a unique like personality, and then his style is like 90s Coke dealer. Like,
he's Australian, right?
Yeah. Adidas jumpsuits, bucket hat, like, but then like when he doesn't have the hat on, he's got like frosted blonde tips, and
right.
It's like, it's super cool.
About to rock up to the club, eh?
Yeah. And so, pretty much Trevor's like, all right, I'll send my guy. I'm like, all right, send your guy. I'll pay the money. This one's got to be worth it.
Right.
So like, I think it was 3 or 4 days later, Nick could make it down there. He checks out the car, and he sends me the infamous video.
Yeah.
The video that just like really set it off on the car. And basically the guy is in front of the car, and he's like talking about how he just showed up at the car.
Yeah.
And it's freshly polished, and it's fucking sex, mate. And he's doing all this, and he's looking at the car, and he's like, it's flawless. And he sees this little kind of, I'm not sure if it's a deposit or a nick or something on the door. And he's like, this car is fucking flawless. And then he goes up to it and he starts picking on.
Yeah.
He's like scratching it with his nail, like trying to see, because it seems like it's on the surface.
Right.
But like it also seems like it's like a nick. So it's like indented. So it's weird. And it's still on there. Right. And like I was literally feeling it last night. I was doing the same thing. I was
like, dude, chill.
But it's
Wait
like,
for Jay.
yeah, like it is like, it's weird. But so this video got really popular because of just the way he presented the car.
Yeah.
But he wasn't lying. Like the car is fucking sex. Like it is, it's sitting behind us. It's dirty from port. It's got probably sea water on it, all kinds of stuff. But like you can tell once this car gets polished up, like it's mint, you know?
And black paint like is definitely hard to keep clean.
Right.
Like,
and when you do get nicks, they're showing up like crazy.
Right. And
it's mint.
Right.
Like not even behind, you know, like whatever that's called, where the tire chips the stuff behind.
Right. Like the road spray stuff.
Yeah, like there's not even any of that. So yeah, Nick inspects it. He says this is the car to buy. So I'm like, oh dang. All right, you know. And I'm like, hey, what's up with the bumpers and side skirts? Like, is that like a, you know, what kit is that? Is that name brand? Is that whatever? And they're like, that's genuine Nismo. Yeah. And I'm like, holy moly. It's got 34,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
Genuine Nismo body parts, Recaro seat, and BBSs.
Right.
I'm like, what's the price?
Yeah.
And he tells me, and again, this is last November, October, November. So this is not, you know, May prices.
Right.
This is, and so, you know, I don't really need to disclose what I paid for it, but let's just say it was it was way too good to pass up.
So how much, we'll do it this way, how much more was it compared to the white one that was beat in the beginning?
A couple thousand.
Yeah.
Like not much.
Not much at all?
No, like it wasn't. It was not a spread. Like it was just like
it was still within that normal price range. Right?
Yeah. So I'm like, what is wrong with it? Was it like a flood car? He's like, no, like everything's good with it. Like everything checks out. So I'm like, all right, let's do it. If it's got Nismo body parts, BBSs, and it's actually clean and low mileage.
Yeah.
The only like weird thing that we both noticed was the engine cover being missing.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Literally. Everything else kind of somewhat makes sense and is in place, you know, but like the engine cover being missing was just like what they do an oil change and like or spark plugs and forget to throw it back on, you know? But so I couldn't really raise an eyebrow at that. I was like, all right, let's do this. So the process after that is like pretty simple in the sense of now you need to put down the deposit until they get the car. So you go to the bank, you wire Trevor the deposit money.
Is there any kind of weird thing to wire money to another country like that where there's a different currency and all that?
No.
Nothing weird with the bank. You just send it over and
a lot of
they have the same routing and account.
Yeah, well, it just depends on how much the company does business in America. So they could have an intermediary bank, which is like a U.S. bank that then forwards it to their international bank. That makes it easier for like it's a domestic wire at that point.
Right.
And so some people, like, I honestly can't remember which Trevor had, but like in the other setup, you're wiring it and doing an international wire, and you have to have more information and have a Swift code, and it has to be like approved and everything, like, because international wires are very much targets of fraud,
right?
So there's a lot of extra info, and you have to have like the invoice, and so you know, I really can't remember, but it all went smooth. I got him the money,
right?
So he went and he had somebody pick up the car, purchase it, bring it to Stacked. Right. And so at that point, I get a bill for the Stacked storage fee, the transport, those inspections, I get and then the balance of the car. So at this point, you're like paying for everything up front.
Right.
Like in the sense, like
paying for the car, paying for the inspections, and still haven't really seen it.
No, I haven't seen it. Just taking
their
Nip
word for
on Nick and Trevor's like word for it. But at this point, I'm pretty confident because I can tell that Trevor is like a meticulous type of guy, and that he really wants to create relationships.
Yeah.
So like I'm super comfortable at this point. I'm like, what can we look for next?
Right.
Like, but not because like, but so I'm just excited. And so, I have everything paid for, everything like ready to go. I do ask him though. I'm like, hey, like I plan to come to Japan in April. I'd like to see the car. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, it's that stacked, Ewan and them will take care of you. And I'm like, okay, cool. I want to drive the car.
Yeah.
He's like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean, dude? What do you mean? Dustin Williams gets to drive his car in Japan? And he's like, yeah, like, I'm not so sure how they're doing that. And I'm also not so sure that it would be worth it for you to, like, kind of pay all of these fees for a one-time drive, while you're here. He's like, if you were here long-term, maybe, you could figure that out. But, like, to drive it for a few days while you're here, like, you're going to pay way more. You have to go through shucking and all of that.
Yeah.
So I was a little bummed, of course, just because, like, at the time I didn't fully understand, like, how that worked, how Dustin Williams was driving his GTR.
Right.
I just was like, well, what do you mean? He could do it, And so, but he did say, yeah, no, come on down. You can check it out. You can see it in person. If it's something that you want to put back on the market because you're not happy with it, you'd have the opportunity to do that.
Right.
And at that point, it wouldn't really make sense because I've prepaid a lot of things.
Yeah.
Pretty much I've paid for everything but shipping.
Yeah.
Because since it's not shipping yet, the quote wouldn't have even been accurate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was cool to know that, like, it was, that's when I really, I think, like, relaxed in the sense of, all right, like, I can go see the car if I want. That's no big deal. And, like, that's comforting.
Right.
Right.
Because, I mean, and especially at a place like Stacked, it's like a very reputable company.
And I had heard of it.
A lot of people have known about,
And I knew other people that had been, like, dealing with them. So basically at this point, car sitting there, it's all good. I don't really have to think about it, because this is like December.
Yeah.
Like I know that this car is not eligible till June. So like I got 6 months of just like twiddling my thumbs waiting.
Right.
In hindsight, I end up actually buying a GTR and getting it registered, So it was like, I figured out how you can do that if anybody wants to know. Right. But it's kind of a waiting game at that point. You have to be patient.
Yeah.
And I think like being able to distract yourself while you're waiting and not going crazy, definitely for me, not ordering a single thing for the car.
Right.
Because I don't even know yet.
Right.
If I order anything, like I'm kind of wasting my money because the car's not in hand. I don't know what it truly needs. And if, like what we ended up talking about, I could have had like a whole front mount setup sitting here.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of second guessing whether I even want to do that.
Right.
And, I would have had to, so when we talked with Richie, and he's talking about stacking these parts, that's kind of a different situation because this has been his dream car forever, and so he knows all the parts that he's wanted to put on it forever.
Yeah. Which he's going to do regardless of the condition. Like if it's museum quality or not, he's going to put those parts on and he's going to make it sick.
Yeah, because that was his dream, right? And so where I did pick this up to potentially flip it, I didn't want, you get somebody who doesn't want that front mount, didn't want that bumper trimmed, didn't want, and so I'm thinking about it in that sense now, like, if you're not going like heavy with it, if you're not trying to make this thing have power, and you might resell it, what's the point of strapping these extras on that somebody else maybe will take off?
Right. Keep it original,
So basically, what do you got, a little fly?
Yeah.
He's got a fly targeting him, yeah. So basically at this point, it's coming up to, February, March, we get into April. In March, Trevor had gone there to check on the car. He had gone to Stacked because it was sitting in their main space.
Right. Which, Stacked would be posting pictures of their, warehouse, and you would see the car in the background. And also, I think in one picture, it was this car and Richie's Type R literally right next to each other.
Yeah, which is wild.
Which is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, like two dudes that know each other in America, their cars are over there sitting next to each other waiting to come. Yeah, he ended up getting his quite a bit earlier than me, which was cool. But so Trevor sends me some pictures, shows me that he was getting it started up and letting it run so that it was not just getting stale, whatever. I mean, it would have been fine, but
a 98 cool. with 17,000 miles.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's been sitting.
Yeah. So, but now it's kind of time to start thinking about shipping, thinking about paperwork, thinking about how all of these things are going to come together.
Right. And this is where people get freaked out, right?
Yeah.
It's because
because it's daunting. It's like, what I've learned is nobody likes to do paperwork.
Yeah.
Like literally.
It intimidates the shit out of everyone.
It is because you're like, dude, if I screw this up, is it going to get rejected? Whatever.
Right. They're going to send it straight to the crusher.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so, Trevor makes that very easy.
Yeah.
And he makes it comfortable.
Right.
You're filling out very minimal paperwork on his end.
Yeah.
He mainly handles it,
because he's done it time and time over.
Oh yeah. And he gives you everything you need, right? So he got everything set up, and basically at that point you need to find a broker, which I think we'll cover in the next episode. But
and what exactly is a broker for?
Well, the broker is who helps you handle everything on this side of things.
On the American side?
On the American side of things. So that way you're not guessing which paperwork you need, trying to get access to the people that you need to send it to.
Right.
All of that. The brokers have those ins and they have those relationships. Right. They've been doing it. They talk to these people every day.
It's their job.
Yeah. So, and that was also easy. Trevor recommended me a broker, and I hit them up, and so. But on his end, still, at this point, we're getting ready for shipping. He's getting the car prepped. He's getting all the paperwork prepped. He is making sure that we have a lane for shipping,
right,
and that he's not dropping it off at port 60 days prior and then having it get destroyed.
Yeah.
He's making sure it's getting dropped off at port and it's getting on the boat shortly after.
Right.
So pretty much he's gets me the fresh quote on shipping. Shipping was $1,800.
Yeah.
That gets it from where it was at to the port where I select.
Yeah.
I could have, and so that was obviously shipping to my port,
right,
of my selection of the port.
So that was what, Osaka to New York?
It was Osaka to New York, and so that's $1,800. I obviously could have chose a different port. It could have been plus minus, whatever. But for us in our first time, New York made sense. Otherwise, it was Baltimore.
Yeah,
which they had given me that option. I was like,
but then you got to go to Baltimore.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I'm like, I don't want to go to New York, but I don't want to go to Baltimore. So I'm like, all right, New York will do it. And so I selected New York. He was like, okay, now we need to pay for shipping, and so then I have to go back to the bank. Why? And so this is part of for me, the hassle is the wiring money.
Yeah, I was about to say, so you had to wire him.
Dude, and then the bank people are like, well, why are you wiring this money to Japan all the time?
Right.
And I'm like, why are you asking me why I'm wiring money to Japan? There ain't no terrorists there.
Right. They're like, red flag, this is fraud.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, this is a car.
No, it's a freaking Skyline.
So I have to have this conversation because I end up having to wire for this single car 3 times. So I end up having this conversation. And, it maybe would have been with the same person had like my bank not been going through managers and stuff at the time.
Right.
So I have 3 separate people I have to explain the right-hand drive. You know, have you seen Fast and the Furious? You know, the whole thing, and then they get it, and then they lay off.
Yeah.
But so the wiring part for me was kind of the hassle. But basically, you know, Trevor gets it to port, and at that point, when he drops it at port, he then goes and overnights all of the original copies of the paperwork to me and my shift knob.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? And then I go and like we were talking about earlier, he had messaged me 3 times.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen it. He's like, hey, a bunch of shift knobs were stolen at port, so I took yours off and sent it to you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, this costs you extra money. You could have just kept that. I have like 8 different shift knobs I can use, you know, but whatever, good on him, right? He was protecting me.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy that stuff that small or simple gets stolen, right?
Yeah.
And that's another reason why we couldn't fill a car full of parts and send it over to.
Yeah, because that's what, and, you know, rewinding a little bit, when we were in Japan and did check out the car, we're thinking, we're going to
fill it full, dude. The trunk's going to be packed.
Nothing. Not a single thing. But, you know, that was a testament for me, like, of the caring that Trevor had, because hey man, that car's sold. He's been paid.
Right.
Like it don't matter, right? Like my shift knob gets stolen, sucks for me. But not when it comes to that dude.
Right.
He's not letting me lose, which was cool.
Yeah.
You know, that was something I walked away from my experience with Trevor and Kizo, was that I wasn't losing.
Yeah. It speaks on his character. Too.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a solid.
And nobody wants to
move.
lose, right?
Right.
Like, but a lot of times you lose.
Right.
You know, it may not be a major loss, but like, I don't feel like I lost on this car at all.
Yeah.
And I've been walking around saying it. Yeah, I won. I won, you know, because like, dude,
hit the lottery. I'm like, wait,
you
did you get this for free?
Yeah, you don't, but you just don't get those experiences like in the car game all the time. Right. Because, you know, there's usually always just a small loss that you have to take, whether it was, you know, that rust you didn't see, or that part that needed to be replaced, or
the wheel curbed, or
whatever.
Or whatever. Right?
Yeah, no, dude, these wheels are mint.
Yeah,
like, everything's
you get them, they're scuffed.
The only damage to the car was us, which we'll talk about in the next episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the outbound from Japan process. You know, it really wasn't horrible. I think I did need to just sign 2 pieces of paper for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, when he overnighted me that, everything was in this like really nice, clear, protective like envelope type thing.
Yeah.
Like every piece of paper was straight, not crinkled. Like it was like really awesome. And it included a bill of sale and an export certificate and certificates of origin and all kinds of in like duplicates of everything.
Yeah.
Like official duplicates, so that you could take it to your town office, so you can have them looked at, you know, when you're clearing port. So that was really cool for me to have it be such a smooth experience on the first time. It almost spoiled it, right? Because I'm like, I either got to work with this man every time, or like I need to get used to it not being like that, you know, right? And that is, you know, real quick before we end this out, like that is, you know, I love Top Rank, but to compare the experience between Top Rank and Trevor, obviously Top Rank, large company, global, so to speak,
more of
type
a dealer.
Company. Yeah. And so it definitely was not as like personal, and the communication was more far and few between.
Right.
You know, because you are dealing with 2 different sets of people. But if I wasn't trying to have the car registered in Japan and be able to drive it there, I absolutely would have bought my GTR through Trevor instead of Top Rank, just because that real personal experience, like with that smaller guy, like was like night and day for sure.
Absolutely. So of all the things you had to do to get it on the boat, hardest thing was what? Wiring the money,
and then like dealing with finding the original car. Yeah.
Like
finding the car is the hardest part, right? And then like the biggest hassle was wiring the money.
Right, which wasn't even that bad.
It wasn't that bad. It's just one of those things. You're like going into your bank for a third time trying to send money to Japan.
Yeah.
But like overall, I would say yes, like getting it to and on the boat was like probably really the easier process.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about in the next episode the waiting for it, tracking it,
right.
like dealing with the broker, like making like that's definitely the harder part because you have to like assume the position of the importer.
Yeah, you got to be on point.
You are the importer though,
right.
at that point, and your name is on all those papers as the importer.
Right.
And so we'll get into that on the next episode and kind of just, lay that out so that there's no confusion. And maybe our experience compared to yours will be different, but you'll at least have maybe some guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we appreciate you guys listening. As always, hit us up at RHDGUYS if you got any questions, Instagram, YouTube, whatever. And we'll be back next time with how to clear it out of port.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Bobby. This is Aaron.
See ya.
Peace.